Hello everyone, Giltar here with part 2 of my review of the 1 to 72 scale Rosenthal CR-Hogire. It's a model kit from the Armored Core Variable Infinity series of models made by Kotobukiya. I did forget to mention one thing in part 1 of the review, which is that this model does come with 6 different hand or fist accessories. You have a left and right grip hand that you can use to hold on to this rifle or any other weapon or accessory. You have a pair of these open hands for just these more interesting poses, and then finally you have a pair of molded fists. So they're not open at all, so unfortunately they can't be used for gripping weapons, but they're nicely molded for sure. Now moving on to the pros and cons, I'll move into my cons first. There are really only 2 cons I'm looking at for this model. First one being the price. It's pretty expensive. We're looking at 4,800 yen at normal pricing, so that's just above $50 American, which is pretty expensive if you consider it. It's $50 or so for a single model kit. And when you look at the main competitor, and really the biggest company around for these types of model kits, which is Bandai, if you look at the master grade model kit line, which is sort of an equivalent to these types of models here, the average price of those are between $30 to $40. When we look at the Armored Core kits, the average is around $40 to $50. And that $10 price difference can really make a dent in your budget if you buy a few Kotobukiya kits as compared to buying a few Bandai Master Grade kits. So that is something to consider. Like every other model kit review I've done of a Kotobukiya model, aside from the Modelock Falk, all the other model kits, like from the Alia and my other Super Robot Wars models, the pricing is always the most significant problem, and again with the Hogire it is another issue, and the most significant issue. The second con is, well, basically some loose parts. There are only really 3 that I can think of, and I'll point them out now. First being these knee components. They go on the side of the knees. So there's 4 in total, and they are prone to falling off if you bump into them and just press them the wrong way. And the problem with that is that, well, they're positioned right at the knee, so that when you're trying to move the leg around for different poses, well, these get in the way. You can solve this problem not by gluing, because if you glue these parts in, because of the fragile nature of the part and the small peg, if they're glued in and you press it the wrong way, it's more likely to snap and break off than just simply flex. They're just really fragile. So I actually recommend against gluing them in. I would say there's 2 options. Generally, if you're looking at painting your model kits, that's all you really need to do. If you give it a full coat of paint, the paint that will cure and dry on the top of the peg here will give it just enough extra material so that it'll be quite snug in the port. The other option is to, instead of painting your model, if you don't intend to paint it, just apply a thin layer of nail polish or crazy glue or super glue. Let it cure as per the instructions, and when it's finally set, then you can reattach the part, and that way again you have extra material on the peg, goes snugly into the port, and you're fine. Now the reason why I recommend this is, again, it's better to have a part fall off than break off. So that's why I don't recommend gluing these parts. Now if we were talking about more sturdy components, yeah, no problem, you can glue those in, but not for something like this that will be pretty easy to break if you press it the wrong way. The second point of weakness in the model are these little rudders or stabilizers on the back of the torso here. They're not too bad, but they're on ball joints, and they don't peg in too securely, so they're not bad though. They're easily reattached. It's not a big deal. However, the most significant point of weakness on the model are the ankle joints. The foot itself has a ball joint peg that goes into a polycap socket. The problem with this setup is that the socket is way too shallow, and it's prone to making the foot pop out of the ankle, and you just have to reattach it. Now, it's not a big deal. It's not terribly inconveniencing, but I think it's, well, first of all, a mistake that would have been or could have been easily avoided. I really have no idea why Kotobukiya decided to use a shallow design for the polycap socket. And had they given it an extra 15 to 20% of depth, this would not be a problem at all. So that is the most sort of a serious offense in my opinion in terms of structural weakness. Is this didn't have to happen, and yet Kotobukiya did. And you know what the thing is? This is a premium product. You're paying a high price for it. It is a high quality product, yet we have a very inexcusable mistake in terms of the design of the model kit in the ankle. So I do have to point that out, and I'm very, very disappointed by that because I expected more out of Kotobukiya. Now, that aside, I'll get into my pros, and I do have several points. And I'll start off with the overall stability of the model. Despite the 3 weak points I mentioned, overall, this is a really solid and stable model kit. It has a nice heft to it. Despite the high part count, most of the parts are very secure and very just solid feeling. There's no worry about this being a fragile or delicate model kit. So that's a good point. Another good point is just simply the size. Despite the Hogire not being as tall as an average Gundam model kit in the master grade 1 to 100 range, it is shorter, but it's also fairly bulky. I would say it's bulkier than the Gundam here, for example. So what it has lost in height, it makes up for in sort of stockiness, in width, and just sort of the broad nature of the mass of the model. So in the end, I think it pretty much evens out with the RX-782 Gundam there. Another point that I like about this model kit, as with most Kotobukiya model kits, is that it's just really detailed. It's helped by the high part count, a lot of separate components that make distinct parts, and it really feels, or rather looks like, a machine. And that's helped by both the design of the Armored Core mecha, the Hogire's design, as well as just simply the sculpting of the plastic parts. It's very detailed. Versus Z has said before that he considers these as basically posable statues. They're very detailed, and they do have some degree of articulation. So that leads to my next point, positive point, which is it actually has a really nice wide range of articulation for it. Aside from the issues with the ankles, they can move very well and allow some wide leg stances. The knees have a nice degree of bend. The hips, as usual, like with the Alia, have a great degree of motion because there's no armor or material around the waist. The waist itself is fully rotational, allows great bending from side to side, front and back. The shoulders have they're on ball joints, very secure. Full rotation, lateral movement, in many different angles, and the elbows themselves have greater than 90 degrees in terms of their bendability. I would say it's more like a 135 degree bend maybe. And the wrists are nice and tight, ball joint pegs, or a combination of plastic and polycap to create a ball joint peg, and it's very secure, very tight, and allows a decent range of articulation. And the back weapons, because they're in sort of just normal pegs into ports, they allow a great range of rotation. So overall, you have many points of articulation, and in every point of articulation, you have a good degree of motion and movement. So not only does this model kit look good and feels good in the hand, has a nice physical presence due to its size, and it's also highly detailed and highly posable. That's a great combination of different attributes. And finally, the last positive point I have is more of a personal pro, in my opinion, because I just like the look of the Hogire. Very industrial design in its appearance, angular, blocky, very machine-like, and it is more plausible in appearance. At a glance, the Hogire, even though it is a fantastic design, it's a giant robot, but when you look at it, it looks more like a vehicle. It looks more like a military machine, something that is plausible in terms of its design. When we look at the Alia, it is similar in that it's very mechanical looking, but it's more sleek. It has more of a futuristic, fantastic look to its design. I look at things like the design of its torso, where it really, combined with the torso shape, as well as this spoiler-like component, it reminds me of like a Formula 1 racer, basically. Whereas when I'm looking at the Hogire, it just looks like a sort of war machine, with no doubt. Whereas this looks like kind of like a really nice looking design, a really sci-fi, science fiction type design, but the Hogire, I think it looks more solid. Psychologically, I can invest more sort of belief in this as a giant, machine. And as a user commented in my Alia reviews, he said that armored cores are really they're meant to be like sort of high-speed bipedal tanks, and that's a great description. These are like walking tanks. Now Gundam designs are similar to that, but they've really gone away from the vehicular design aesthetics, whereas the Armored Core designs are still very firmly entrenched in sort of a hybrid of humanoid design and like vehicle design, which I really like, and the Hogire really brings that to the table. So overall, I would say the pros far outweigh the cons, but the one con that really has a lot of weight to it is the price. So I'm going to say this: if you have the money, I recommend considering the Hogire or other Armored Core model kits. However, if you are on a budget, don't think about it at all unless you can find one on sale, because really it's a lot of money to spend on a single model kit, and I can't justify recommending this to a person who is on a limited budget for their hobby. So it's not a straightforward answer, but consider those 2 points. But aside from that, overall it's a great detail in the sculpting, a lot of articulation, great physical presence, and a nice addition to any sort of mecha related collection. So I hope you guys enjoyed the review and got something out of it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys at the next video.